Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she ladled another portion of mashed potatoes onto a soldier's plate. The mess hall was packed with hungry troops, all eager for their evening meal after a long day of training. She had been working in the kitchen for 3 months now, ever since she arrived at Fort Braxton as a civilian contractor. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid well and gave her a place to stay while she figured out her next move. After leaving her previous life behind, she needed time to heal and think. The routine of preparing meals, serving food, and cleaning up afterward gave her mind something to focus on besides the memories that haunted her dreams. "Thank you." "Ma'am?" said a young private as she filled his plate. Sarah nodded with a small smile and moved on to the next person in line. She kept her head down most of the time, preferring not to draw attention to herself. The other kitchen staff knew her as quiet but hardworking, someone who showed up early and stayed late without complaint. As the dinner rush continued, Sarah noticed the conversations around her. Soldiers talked about their training exercises, upcoming deployments, and families back home. Some joked and laughed while others ate in tired silence. She had grown fond of these young men and women who served their country with such dedication. The kitchen supervisor, Mrs. Henderson, approached Sarah during a brief lull. "You're doing great work here, Sarah. The soldiers always compliment the food when you're on duty. Have you ever thought about making this permanent?" Sarah paused while refilling the serving trays. "I'm just taking things one day at a time right now." Mrs. Henderson nodded understandingly. "Well, we're lucky to have you. Your attention to detail and work ethic remind me of military training. Were you ever in the service?" "Something like that," Sarah replied quietly, then quickly changed the subject. "Should I start preparing the dessert trays?" As the evening wore on, Sarah noticed a commotion near the entrance. Several high-ranking officers had entered the mess hall, conducting what appeared to be a routine inspection. She had seen these inspections before and knew they were standard procedure. But something about tonight felt different. The officers moved through the dining area, checking cleanliness standards and talking with soldiers. Sarah continued her work, hoping to remain invisible as always. She had become expert at blending into the background, a skill that had served her well in many situations. One of the soldiers in line, a sergeant named Rodriguez, struck up a conversation. "You know, ma'am, this is some of the best food we've had in months. My buddies and I were just saying how much better the meals have gotten since you started working here." "I just follow the recipes," Sarah said modestly. "It's more than that," Rodriguez continued. "You care about what you're doing. It shows in everything, from how you handle the food to how you treat us. Not everyone takes pride in their work like that." Sarah felt a warmth in her chest at the compliment, but she also felt exposed. Praise made her uncomfortable because it meant people were paying attention to her. She had spent months trying to remain unnoticed, and comments like these worried her. The inspection team was getting closer to the serving area. Sarah could see them checking equipment and observing food safety procedures. She tried to focus on her work, but her heart rate increased slightly. Official scrutiny always made her nervous, even when she had nothing to hide. "Everything looks excellent here," she heard one of the officers say to Mrs. Henderson. "Your team is running a tight operation." "Thank you, sir. We take pride in feeding our troops well," Mrs. Henderson replied. Sarah kept serving, hoping the officers would move on quickly. She noticed that one of them, a colonel with graying hair and sharp eyes, seemed to be observing everything more carefully than the others. He watched how the kitchen staff interacted with the soldiers and paid attention to small details that others might miss. As the last of the dinner crowd was served, Sarah began cleaning the serving area. She was exhausted and looking forward to finishing her shift. Tomorrow would bring another day of the same routine, which was exactly what she wanted. Predictability felt safe after years of uncertainty and danger. The colonel and his team finished their inspection and headed toward the exit. Sarah allowed herself to relax slightly, thinking the evening would end without incident. She had successfully remained in the background once again, just another face in the crowd of kitchen workers. But as she reached for a towel to wipe down the serving counter, her sleeve rode up slightly on her left arm. It was only for a moment, barely noticeable to most people. Sarah quickly pulled her sleeve back down, but something in her peripheral vision made her look up. The colonel had stopped walking and was looking directly at her. Their eyes met for just a second before Sarah looked away and busied herself with cleaning. Her heart began to race as she realized he might have seen something he shouldn't have. She tried to convince herself that she was being paranoid, that a brief glance meant nothing. But years of training had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now those instincts were telling her that her carefully constructed new life might be about to change forever. Colonel James Patterson had seen enough military operations to notice details that others missed. As he walked through the mess hall that evening, something caught his attention about the woman serving food. Her movements were too precise, too efficient. She carried herself with a bearing that suggested military training. Despite wearing civilian clothes and working in a kitchen, when her sleeve had ridden up, revealing just a glimpse of what looked like a distinctive tattoo, Patterson's years of experience kicked in. He had seen that particular design only in one place before, and it wasn't somewhere most people would expect to find someone serving meals in a base cafeteria. After completing the inspection, Patterson returned to his office and pulled up the personnel files for all civilian contractors working on base. Sarah Martinez's file was surprisingly thin. Basic background check, references from previous employers, standard paperwork. Nothing that raised red flags officially, but also nothing that explained the professional competence he had observed. He made a mental note to look into this further, but carefully. If his suspicions were correct, there could be very good reasons why someone with Sarah's apparent background would be working under an assumed identity. The military had ways of protecting people who had served in sensitive positions, and rushing to conclusions could put someone in danger. Meanwhile, Sarah finished her shift with growing unease. She had noticed the colonel's lingering glance and the way he had paused after seeing her arm. In her line of work, she had learned that small details could have big consequences. A glimpse of her tattoo might seem insignificant to most people, but to someone with the right knowledge, it could reveal everything she was trying to hide. That night, Sarah lay in her small apartment near the base, staring at the ceiling. Sleep wouldn't come as she replayed the evening's events in her mind. She had been so careful for months, keeping her sleeves down, avoiding situations where anyone might see the distinctive markings on her skin. One moment of carelessness might have undone all her efforts to build a quiet, anonymous life. The tattoo was small but unmistakable to those who knew what to look for. It represented membership in an elite unit that didn't officially exist. A group of soldiers who had undertaken missions that would never appear in any public record. Getting the tattoo had been a rite of passage, a symbol of belonging to something special. Now it felt like a target painted on her skin. Sarah had left that life behind for good reasons. The final mission had gone wrong in ways that still gave her nightmares. People she cared about had died, and the psychological toll had become too much to bear. When her commanding officer had suggested she take an extended leave, she had asked for something more permanent. A new identity, a clean slate, a chance to be someone normal. The next morning, Sarah arrived at work early as usual. She chose a long-sleeve shirt and made sure it was loose enough that it wouldn't ride up during her duties. Mrs. Henderson greeted her warmly and assigned her to breakfast prep, a routine task that would keep her busy and hopefully help calm her nerves. As she chopped vegetables and prepared ingredients, Sarah tried to convince herself that she was overreacting. Military bases had inspections all the time. Officers looked at everything and everyone. One glance didn't necessarily mean anything. Maybe the colonel hadn't seen what she thought he had seen, or maybe he had seen it but didn't recognize its significance. But deep down, she knew better. The colonel's expression had been too knowing, too focused. Someone with his rank and experience would be familiar with special operations symbols. If he had seen her tattoo clearly enough, he would know exactly what it meant. The breakfast rush began and Sarah threw herself into her work, serving food, interacting with soldiers, maintaining the routine that had become her anchor. The familiar tasks helped steady her nerves, but she remained hyper-aware of her surroundings, watching for any sign that things had changed. Around mid-morning, Mrs. Henderson approached her with a concerned expression. "Sarah, honey, is everything all right? You seem a bit tense today." "I'm fine," Sarah replied, forcing a smile. "Just didn't sleep well last night." "Well, take it easy on yourself. You work harder than anyone else here, and we don't want you burning out." The kindness in Mrs. Henderson's voice made Sarah's chest tighten with emotion. These people had accepted her without question, treating her like family. They had no idea about her past or the dangerous world she had come from. In their eyes, she was just Sarah, the dedicated kitchen worker who made sure the soldiers ate well. As the morning progressed, Sarah began to relax slightly. Maybe she had imagined the colonel's reaction. Maybe her paranoia was getting the better of her. She had been living under stress for so long that it was possible she was seeing threats where none existed. But then, during the lunch prep, one of the other kitchen workers mentioned something that made her blood run cold. "Did you hear?" said Janet, one of the older women who worked the morning shift. Colonel Patterson was asking questions about the staff, wanted to know about everyone's background and how long they'd been working here. Sarah's hand stilled on the potatoes she was peeling. "What kind of questions?" "Oh, nothing too specific. Just general stuff about work performance and reliability." Mrs. Henderson said he seemed particularly interested in the newer hires. The potato slipped from Sarah's hands and fell into the sink with a splash. She quickly retrieved it, hoping no one had noticed her reaction. But inside, her mind was racing. Asking questions about staff backgrounds wasn't normal behavior for a routine inspection. It suggested the colonel was looking for something or someone specific. Sarah finished the lunch prep in a daze, her thoughts consumed by the implications of what she had learned. If Colonel Patterson was investigating the staff, it meant her cover might be blown. And if her cover was blown, it would only be a matter of time before her past caught up with her. She had thought she was safe on this remote base, hidden among the civilian contractors and kitchen staff. But now it seemed that her carefully constructed new life was about to crumble. The question was what she should do about it. Running would only confirm suspicions, but staying might put her and others in danger. As she served lunch to the steady stream of soldiers, Sarah tried to appear normal while her mind worked through possible scenarios. Whatever happened next, she knew that her quiet months of anonymity were coming to an end. The only question was whether that would mean safety or disaster. Colonel Patterson spent the next 2 days conducting discreet inquiries about Sarah Martinez. He contacted his connections in military intelligence and special operations, asking careful questions without revealing too much about why he was interested. The responses he received only deepened his suspicions. Nobody had heard of a Sarah Martinez with her background, but several people mentioned a missing operative from a classified unit. Someone who had disappeared from official records after a mission went sideways 18 months ago. The description matched the woman he had seen in the mess hall, and more importantly, the timeline fit perfectly. Patterson found himself in a delicate situation. If this woman was who he thought she was, approaching her directly could have serious consequences. People in deep cover often had good reasons for hiding, and forcing them into the open could put lives at risk. But he also had a responsibility to ensure base security and understand who was working in sensitive areas. On Thursday morning, Patterson made his decision. Instead of confronting Sarah directly, he would create an opportunity for her to reveal herself if she chose to. He arranged for a special visitor to tour the base, someone whose presence would be unmistakable to anyone with the right background. Sarah noticed the increased security activity as soon as she arrived at work. Military police were more visible than usual, and there seemed to be extra personnel posted at key locations around the base. Mrs. Henderson mentioned that they were expecting an important visitor, but she didn't know who or why. During the lunch preparation, Sarah overheard 2 soldiers discussing the visitor. One mentioned seeing black SUVs with government plates, while another said he had spotted personnel from the Defense Intelligence Agency. The information made Sarah's stomach clench with anxiety. High-level intelligence visits usually meant one of 2 things. Either there was a serious security threat, or someone very important was coming to the base for classified reasons. As she worked, Sarah tried to piece together what was happening. The timing seemed too coincidental to ignore. First the colonel's suspicious behavior, then questions about staff backgrounds, and now a mysterious VIP visit. It felt like the walls were closing in around her carefully constructed new life. The lunch rush was busier than usual, with extra security personnel joining the regular troops for meals. Sarah kept her head down and focused on serving food, but she remained alert to everything happening around her. Her training had taught her to gather information, even in seemingly innocent situations. Then she saw him, walking through the mess hall with Colonel Patterson and several other high-ranking officers. Was a man she recognized immediately, General Marcus Webb, former commander of Joint Special Operations Command and one of the few people who knew the full details of her last mission. He moved with the same confident stride she remembered, his sharp eyes taking in everything around him. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she continued serving food. The general hadn't seen her yet, but it was only a matter of time. If he recognized her, her cover would be completely blown. Worse, his presence might mean that her former unit was being reactivated, or that there were new threats requiring her specific skills. She tried to remain calm and continue working normally, but every instinct was telling her to run. The exit was only 30 feet away, but fleeing would only confirm what Colonel Patterson already suspected. She was trapped between maintaining her cover and preparing for the inevitable moment when her two worlds would collide. General Webb and his entourage moved slowly through the dining area, stopping to talk with various soldiers. Sarah could hear fragments of their conversations, standard interactions between high-ranking officers and enlisted personnel, but she also noticed that the general's attention seemed to wander, as if he was looking for something specific. "This is excellent food," she heard General Webb say to Colonel Patterson. "Your troops are well taken care of here." "We have an outstanding kitchen staff," Patterson replied. "They take real pride in their work." Sarah's heart pounded as she realized they were discussing the very area where she worked. She tried to position herself behind other staff members, using them as shields while she continued her duties. But the serving line was exposed, and there were only so many places to hide. As the group approached the serving area, Sarah made a desperate decision. She grabbed a large pot from the stove and carried it toward the back kitchen, hoping to disappear into the prep area before anyone could get a clear look at her face. The pot was heavy and awkward, but it provided good cover as she moved. But just as she thought she might escape notice, disaster struck. Another kitchen worker, carrying a tray of dishes, collided with her as they both tried to navigate the narrow passage between workstations. The pot slipped from Sarah's hands and she instinctively reached out to catch it, her sleeve riding up to reveal several inches of her forearm. The distinctive tattoo was clearly visible for several seconds before she could adjust her clothing. When she looked up, she found herself staring directly into General Webb's surprised face. Recognition dawned in his eyes immediately, followed by a complex mix of emotions she couldn't quite read. "Well, I'll be damned," the general said quietly, his voice barely audible over the kitchen noise. Colonel Patterson stepped forward, his expression confirming that this encounter was not accidental. "General Webb, I'd like you to meet Sarah Martinez, one of our most dedicated kitchen staff members." The moment stretched uncomfortably as the three of them stood there, surrounded by the bustling activity of the lunch service. Other staff members continued working around them, unaware that something significant was happening. Sarah felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see which way she would fall. General Webb studied her face carefully, as if verifying what he already knew to be true. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled but carried undertones that only she would understand. "Ms. Martinez, isn't it? I have a feeling we might have some mutual acquaintances. Perhaps we could have a conversation sometime soon." Sarah nodded slowly, knowing that her months of anonymity were officially over. Whatever came next would determine whether her old life would pull her back into a world she had tried so hard to escape, or whether there might be a different path forward that she hadn't yet considered. The general and his entourage moved on, but not before Colonel Patterson gave her a meaningful look that said they would be talking very soon. As the lunch service continued around her, Sarah realized that everything she thought she knew about her future was about to change completely. That evening, Sarah sat in her small apartment, staring at the phone that had been delivered to her door an hour earlier. The message with it was simple: "Please call when you're ready to talk. Webb." She recognized the general's handwriting from briefings she had attended years ago, when her life was completely different. For months, she had been living as Sarah Martinez, kitchen worker and civilian contractor, but seeing General Webb had brought back memories of who she used to be. Captain Elena Rodriguez, Special Operations Officer with a classified service record that officially didn't exist. The woman who had led missions in places that didn't appear on any map, doing things that were never supposed to be discussed. She picked up the phone and dialed the number written on the note. General Webb answered on the first ring, as if he had been waiting for her call. "Elena," he said, using her real name for the first time in 18 months. "I've been wondering what happened to you." "I needed to disappear for a while," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know. After what happened in Syria, we all understood why you needed time. But Elena, we've been looking for you for months. Not to bring you back, but to make sure you were safe. The concern in his voice was genuine, and it hit her harder than she expected. In her rush to escape her old life, she had assumed that everyone would be angry about her disappearance. She hadn't considered that people might be worried about her well-being. The mission went wrong, Elena said, the words coming out in a rush. Marcus was killed because of my decisions. 3 good soldiers died, and it was my fault. Elena, stop right there. We investigated that mission thoroughly. What happened in Syria wasn't your fault. The intelligence was bad from the start, and you made the best decisions possible with the information you had. But I was the team leader. Those men trusted me to bring them home. General Webb was quiet for a moment before responding. Elena, in the 15 years I've known you, you've never failed a mission. You've saved more lives than most people will ever know about. One bad day doesn't erase all the good you've done. Elena felt tears building in her eyes, emotions she had kept buried for months suddenly surfacing. She had carried the guilt and trauma alone, convinced that everyone blamed her for the disaster in Syria. Hearing that the official investigation had cleared her of wrongdoing was both a relief and somehow made the pain worse. What happens now? She asked. That's up to you. Your disappearance was handled quietly. Officially, you're on extended medical leave for PTSD, which isn't far from the truth. You can come back to active duty whenever you're ready, or you can stay Elena Rodriguez and make a new life for yourself. And Sarah Martinez can disappear as quietly as she appeared if that's what you want. We've been protecting your cover for months, Elena. We know you needed time to heal. The next morning, Elena went to work at the mess hall as usual, but everything felt different. Colonel Patterson was waiting for her in Mrs. Henderson's office, along with a woman in civilian clothes who introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Chen from Military Psychological Services. Elena, Colonel Patterson said, we need to have an honest conversation about your situation here. Over the next hour, Elena learned that her cover story had been much thinner than she thought. Military intelligence had identified her within weeks of her arrival at Fort Braxton, but they had chosen to let her remain in place while they monitored her well-being. The job in the mess hall hadn't been random placement by a civilian contractor agency. It had been arranged specifically to give her a safe space to recover. We've been watching over you, Dr. Chen explained. Not spying, but making sure you were safe and getting the help you needed, even if you didn't realize you were getting it. Elena felt a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. You mean Mrs. Henderson knows? Mrs. Henderson knows that you're someone who needed a safe place to work through some difficult experiences. She doesn't know the specifics, but she's been part of keeping you stable and grounded. Colonel Patterson leaned forward in his chair. Elena, you're one of the most decorated special operations officers in the military. But more than that, you're someone who has dedicated her life to protecting others. We weren't going to abandon you when you needed protection yourself. The conversation continued for another hour, covering Elena's options and the support available to her. She could return to active duty with full psychological support and a fresh assignment. She could transition to a training role, teaching new special operations recruits. Or she could remain in civilian life with continued support and protection. What I don't understand, Elena said, is why you brought General Webb here. Why reveal my location now? Colonel Patterson and Dr. Chen exchanged glances before the colonel answered. Because hiding isn't healing, Elena. You've been stable here for months, but you haven't been moving forward. Sometimes confronting the past is the only way to build a future. That afternoon, Elena returned to the mess hall for what she thought might be her last shift as Sarah Martinez. Mrs. Henderson greeted her with a knowing smile that suggested she understood more than she had let on. How are you doing, honey? Mrs. Henderson asked with unusual gentleness. I'm okay, Elena replied. Mrs. Henderson, did you know? The older woman nodded slowly. I didn't know the details, but I could tell you were someone who had been through something difficult. You carried yourself like my son did when he came back from deployment, wounded, but trying to be strong. Elena felt overwhelmed by the kindness she had been shown by people who barely knew her real story. Thank you for giving me a place to heal. That's what we do for family, Mrs. Henderson said simply. And you'll always be family here, no matter what name you use or what job you have. As Elena served lunch that day, she looked at the soldiers eating the food she had prepared and realized something important. Whether she was Captain Elena Rodriguez leading special operations missions or Sarah Martinez serving meals in a mess hall, She was still someone who took care of others. The uniform might be different, but the core of who she was remained the same. For the first time in months, Elena began to think about what she really wanted for her future, rather than just trying to escape her past. 2 weeks after her conversation with General Webb, Elena found herself sitting in a conference room at Fort Braxton with several high-ranking officers she hadn't seen in months. The meeting had been arranged to discuss her future, but as she listened to the various options being presented, she realized that none of them felt quite right. "We have a position open at the Special Operations Training Center," explained Colonel Morrison from Personnel. "You'd be teaching advanced tactics to new operators. It would use your skills while keeping you stateside. There's also an intelligence analyst position available," added Major Kim from the Defense Intelligence Agency. "Your field experience would be invaluable for threat assessment and mission planning." Elena listened politely to each option, but her mind kept wandering to the soldiers she had been serving in the mess hall. Many of them were young, fresh out of basic training, trying to find their place in the military. They reminded her of herself when she first enlisted, full of determination but not always sure how to channel it effectively. "What about staying here at Fort Braxton?" she asked suddenly. The room fell quiet. General Webb raised an eyebrow. "In what capacity?" "I've been thinking about the conversations I've had with soldiers over the past few months. A lot of them are struggling with things that go beyond basic military training. Some are dealing with family problems. Others are having trouble adjusting to military life. And some are showing early signs of the kind of stress that led to my own breakdown." Elena paused, organizing her thoughts. What if there was a program that helped soldiers develop psychological resilience before they reached the breaking point? Something that combined practical life skills with mental health support, delivered by someone who has been where they are. Dr. Chen leaned forward with interest. "You're talking about preventive intervention rather than crisis response." "Exactly. I've learned more about taking care of people in the past few months working in that kitchen than I did in years of special operations. But I've also learned that my military experience gives me credibility with soldiers that civilian counselors sometimes struggle to achieve." Colonel Patterson nodded thoughtfully. "It's an interesting idea, but it would require developing an entirely new program structure." "Not entirely new," Elena replied. "Mrs. Henderson has been doing informal counseling in that mess hall for years. Soldiers trust her because she feeds them and takes care of them. They open up to her in ways they wouldn't with an official therapist. What if we formalize that approach?" Over the next hour, Elena outlined her vision for a program that would combine practical life skills training with psychological support, delivered in informal settings where soldiers would feel comfortable participating. The mess hall could be one venue, but there could be others. Fitness centers, recreation areas, even maintenance workshops. The key would be meeting soldiers where they are, not requiring them to admit they need help, Elena explained. "Some of the guys who eat lunch have told me things they would never say in an official counseling session." General Webb listened carefully to Elena's proposal, asking detailed questions about implementation and oversight. Finally, he leaned back in his chair with a slight smile. "Elena, in all the years I've known you, you've never been content with simple solutions. You always want to fix the whole system. Is that a bad thing? Not at all. It's what made you an exceptional officer, and it's what will make you exceptional at whatever you choose to do next." The meeting concluded with an agreement to develop a pilot program based on Elena's ideas. She would remain at Fort Braxton, officially transitioning from civilian contractor to military psychological services liaison. The position would allow her to maintain her connections in the mess hall while developing new programs to support soldier well-being. That evening, Elena called her parents for the first time in over a year. The conversation was difficult, filled with tears and explanations for her long absence. But it was also healing in ways she hadn't expected. "Mija," her mother said in Spanish. "We knew something had happened. Your letters stopped, and when we called your old number, it was disconnected. We were so worried. I'm sorry, Mama, I was dealing with some difficult things and didn't know how to explain them." "Are you safe now?" her father asked. "Yes, Papa, I'm safe. And I'm figuring out how to help other people stay safe, too." Her parents didn't need to know the details of her military service or the reasons for her disappearance. What mattered was that their daughter was alive, healing, and finding her way back to the person she wanted to be. The next day, Elena began working with Dr. Chen to develop the framework for her new program. They started by conducting informal interviews with soldiers in the mess hall, asking about the challenges they faced and the kind of support they wished was available. "The thing is," explained Private Johnson, a young soldier from Texas, "sometimes you just need someone to tell you that what you're feeling is normal. Like being homesick doesn't make you weak, you know? And maybe some practical stuff too," added Sergeant Williams, a more experienced soldier. "How to manage money, how to maintain relationships when you're deployed, how to deal with stress without turning to alcohol." As Elena compiled the feedback, she realized that many soldiers were dealing with the same issues she had faced throughout her career. The difference was that she had learned to cope through trial and error, often at great personal cost. This program could give soldiers tools and support before they reached crisis points. Mrs. Henderson became an unofficial advisor for the project, sharing insights from her years of observing and supporting soldiers. "The most important thing," she told Elena, "is that they trust you. And trust comes from showing up consistently, not from having the right credentials." Elena thought about those words as she prepared for her first official presentation to base leadership about the pilot program. She was no longer trying to hide who she had been or pretend to be someone she wasn't. Instead, she was learning to integrate all parts of her experience into something new and meaningful. The woman who had served meals as Sarah Martinez and the officer who had led special operations as Captain Elena Rodriguez were both part of who she was becoming. And for the first time in months, that felt like exactly the right person to be. 6 months after Elena's identity was revealed, the pilot program she had proposed was showing remarkable results. The Resilience Through Connection initiative had been implemented across 3 different areas of Fort Braxton, and early data suggested it was having a significant impact on soldier well-being and retention rates. Elena stood before a room full of military commanders from bases across the country, presenting the program's outcomes. She wore her dress uniform for the first time in over a year, the familiar weight of her ribbons and insignia serving as a reminder of how far she had traveled to reach this moment. "The key insight behind this program," Elena explained to the assembled officers, "is that soldiers are more likely to seek support when it's offered in familiar, non-threatening environments by people they trust. Traditional counseling services remain important, but they shouldn't be the only option available." General Webb, who had been instrumental in supporting the program's development, asked the first question, "What specific outcomes have you measured?" Elena clicked to her next slide, showing data that had impressed even the most skeptical observers. Stress-related incidents have decreased by 37% among soldiers who participate in program activities. More importantly, soldiers are seeking help for personal problems much earlier, before they escalate into serious issues that affect mission readiness. Colonel Martinez from Fort Campbell raised her hand. "How do you ensure the informal nature of the program doesn't compromise professional boundaries?" "That's an excellent question," Elena replied. "We've developed clear protocols while maintaining the approachable atmosphere that makes the program effective. All staff receive specialized training in recognizing when issues require formal intervention, and we have established referral pathways to licensed mental health professionals." The presentation continued for another hour, with Elena fielding questions about implementation costs, staff training requirements, and integration with existing military mental health services. The interest level was high, and several base commanders expressed immediate interest in implementing similar programs at their installations. After the formal presentation, Elena found herself in smaller discussions with individual commanders who wanted to understand the personal journey that had led to the program's development. She had learned to be honest about her own experiences without sharing classified details about her special operations background. "The truth is," she told Colonel Roberts from Fort Hood, "I developed this program because I wish something like it had existed when I was struggling. Military culture often discourages seeking help until problems become severe. This approach tries to normalize support-seeking behavior by integrating it into daily military life." Later that afternoon, Elena returned to the mess hall where everything had started. Mrs. Henderson greeted her with a proud smile and a warm hug. "Look at you, all fancy in your dress uniform," Mrs. Henderson said with obvious affection. "But you know you'll always be our Sarah to me no matter what name you use officially." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Elena replied. "This place saved my life, Mrs. Henderson. You saved my life." "Nonsense, honey. You saved yourself. We just gave you a safe place to do it. As the dinner rush began, Elena joined the serving line alongside her former coworkers. It had become a tradition for her to help serve meals whenever her schedule allowed, maintaining the connections that had been so crucial to her recovery. Private Johnson, the young soldier from Texas who had been one of her first informal counseling successes, approached the serving line with a group of newer recruits. He had been promoted to corporal and now served as a mentor to incoming soldiers. "Ma'am," Johnson said with a grin, "these guys don't believe me when I tell them you used to work in the kitchen before you became our program coordinator." Elena laughed as she served food to the surprised recruits. "Corporal Johnson is telling the truth. I learned more about leadership serving meals than I did in some of my advanced military courses." One of the new soldiers, a nervous-looking young woman named Private Davis, spoke up hesitantly. "Ma'am, is it true that you help soldiers who are having trouble adjusting to military life?" "I help create programs that support all soldiers," Elena replied carefully. "But more importantly, you have people like Corporal Johnson and Mrs. Henderson here who understand what you're going through. The support network is bigger than any one person." After the dinner service, Elena walked through the base with a sense of satisfaction she hadn't felt in years. The evening was warm, and soldiers were engaged in various recreational activities around the installation. Some were playing basketball, others were sitting in groups talking, and a few were participating in one of the program's informal discussion sessions near the recreation center. Elena stopped by the session, where Sergeant Williams was leading a conversation about managing finances on a military salary. The discussion was animated but supportive, with more experienced soldiers sharing practical advice with newer recruits. This was exactly what Elena had envisioned when she first proposed the program. Dr. Chen joined Elena as she observed the session. "You know," Dr. Chen said quietly, "when you first described this idea, I wasn't sure it would work. The integration of informal support with professional mental health services seemed too ambitious. What changed your mind?" "Watching you work with the soldiers. You have a unique ability to meet people where they are emotionally, while still maintaining appropriate boundaries. It's a rare skill." Elena considered this feedback as they walked back toward the administration building. "I think it comes from having been where they are. When you've struggled with the same issues your soldiers are facing, it's easier to provide authentic support." "Have you thought about what comes next?" Dr. Chen asked. "The program is clearly successful and there's going to be demand for expansion to other bases." "I've been thinking about that a lot lately," Elena admitted. "Part of me wants to stay here at Fort Braxton where everything started. But I also know that other soldiers at other bases could benefit from these programs." As they reached Elena's office, Dr. Chen handed her a folder. "These are preliminary orders for a new assignment. The Army is creating a special programs division focused on innovative approaches to soldier well-being. They want you to lead it." Elena opened the folder and scanned the documents. The position would involve traveling to bases nationwide, implementing and overseeing resilience programs, and training other personnel to carry out similar initiatives. It was a significant promotion and a chance to impact thousands of soldiers across the military. "It's a big opportunity," Elena said thoughtfully. "It is. But Elena, whatever you decide, know that you've already accomplished something remarkable here. You've proven that healing and service can go hand in hand." That night, Elena sat in her apartment reviewing the assignment documents and thinking about her journey from Special Operations Officer to kitchen worker to program coordinator. Each phase had taught her something different about herself and about what it meant to serve others. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was General Webb. "Elena, I hear congratulations are in order," he said. "I haven't accepted the position yet," she replied. "But you're considering it." "Good. Elena, when I first met you years ago, I saw someone with exceptional tactical skills and leadership potential. But what I've witnessed over the past year has been even more impressive. You've taken your own struggles and turned them into a way to help others. That's not just good military service. That's exceptional human service." After the call, Elena walked to her window and looked out at the base where she had rebuilt her life. Tomorrow she would need to make a decision about her future. But tonight she allowed herself to feel proud of how far she had come. The tattoo on her arm, once a symbol that had nearly exposed her, now felt like a reminder of all the different versions of herself she had been and could still become. Whether she stayed at Fort Braxton or accepted the new assignment, She knew she would continue finding ways to serve others while honoring her own journey of healing and growth. 1 year later, Elena stood in the Pentagon briefing room addressing a gathering of senior military leaders from all branches of the armed forces. Her new position as Director of Military Resilience Programs had taken her to bases across the country. But today she was presenting the annual report on the initiative that had started in a small mess hall at Fort Braxton. The Resilience Through Connection program is now active at 47 military installations, Elena reported, her voice confident and clear. We've documented a 45% reduction in stress-related incidents, a 30% increase in soldiers seeking preventive mental health support, and most significantly, a 28% improvement in overall troop retention rates. Secretary of Defense Harrison nodded approvingly. These are impressive numbers, Colonel Rodriguez. What do you attribute the success to? Elena had been promoted to full colonel 6 months earlier, a recognition of both her innovative program development and her leadership in implementing military-wide policy changes. The rank felt earned in a way that her previous promotions had not, because it reflected not just her military skills, but her ability to transform personal struggle into institutional improvement. The success comes from changing how we think about soldier support, Elena explained. Instead of waiting for problems to become severe enough to require intervention, we're creating environments where seeking help is normalized and integrated into daily military life. After the briefing, Elena had lunch with General Webb, who had become not just a mentor but a close friend throughout her journey. They sat in a quiet restaurant near the Pentagon, discussing the future of military mental health initiatives. You know, General Webb said over coffee, when I first spotted you in that mess hall, I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew who you had been, but I had no idea who you were becoming. I didn't know either, Elena admitted. For a long time, I thought losing my special operations career meant losing myself entirely. I didn't realize that everything I had learned as an operator would actually make me better at this new role. How so? Elena considered the question carefully. Special operations taught me to assess situations quickly, adapt to changing circumstances, and work with limited resources to achieve objectives. But more than that, it taught me that mission success depends on taking care of your people. This work is just taking care of people on a larger scale. Their conversation was interrupted by Elena's phone buzzing with a text message. It was from Mrs. Henderson at Fort Braxton. Saw you on the military news channel today. Still proud of our Sarah. Come visit soon. Elena smiled and showed the message to General Webb. Some things don't change, and some things shouldn't, he replied. Elena, I've been watching your career for 15 years, and I've never seen you more effective or more fulfilled than you are right now. That evening, Elena returned to her apartment in the Washington area, which she had decorated with mementos from her travels to different military installations. Photos of soldiers participating in resilience programs covered one wall, reminding her daily of the faces behind the statistics she presented in briefings. She opened her laptop to review the proposal she had been working on for weeks. The next phase of her program would involve training civilian employers to support veterans transitioning to civilian careers, extending the principles of integrated support beyond active military service. As she worked, Elena reflected on the unexpected path her life had taken. The woman who had hidden her identity while serving meals had become someone who was helping reshape military culture. The trauma that had once seemed like a career-ending failure had become the foundation for work that was improving thousands of lives. Her phone rang, and she was surprised to see the caller ID showed Dr. Chen from Fort Braxton. Elena, I hope I'm not calling too late, Dr. Chen said. Not at all. What's going on? I wanted to let you know about something wonderful. Do you remember Private Davis, the young woman who was struggling with homesickness when you first started the program? Elena did remember her, a quiet, nervous recruit who had been on the verge of requesting discharge during her first month of service. She just graduated from officer candidate school, Dr. Chen continued. She's being commissioned as a second lieutenant, and she specifically requested assignment to a base with one of your resilience programs. She wants to help other soldiers the way you helped her. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes. That's incredible. Elena, she's not the only one. We're seeing soldiers who benefited from the program choosing to stay in the military and specifically requesting roles where they can support others. You haven't just created a program. You've started a movement. After the call ended, Elena sat quietly in her apartment, processing the magnitude of what Dr. Chen had told her. The ripple effects of the work she had started were creating new ripple effects, spreading outward in ways she could never have anticipated. She walked to her bedroom and opened the drawer where she kept her old special operations gear. The tattoo that had once threatened to expose her cover now felt like a badge of honor representing not just her past service, but her ongoing commitment to protecting and supporting others. Elena had learned that healing wasn't about forgetting or moving past difficult experiences. It was about integrating those experiences into a larger purpose, using pain as a foundation for helping others avoid or overcome similar struggles. As she prepared for bed, Elena thought about tomorrow's schedule. She would be visiting Fort Campbell to evaluate their newly implemented program, then traveling to Naval Station Norfolk to train staff for their pilot initiative. Each base presented unique challenges and opportunities, but the fundamental mission remained the same, creating environments where service members could thrive personally and professionally. The journey from Captain Elena Rodriguez through Sarah Martinez to Colonel. Elena Rodriguez had taught her that identity was not about the uniform you wore or the job you performed. It was about the values you lived and the impact you made on others. Whether serving meals in a mess hall or briefing Pentagon officials, she had always been someone who took care of people. Now she just did it on a much larger scale, with the full support of an institution that had learned to value resilience and healing as much as traditional military strength. And every day, she honored both the woman who had served in shadows and the woman who had found herself in the light of service to others.